this is very interesting. So here's the biochemical construction of hallucinogenic chemicals. So the first thing you see on the bottom right is a serotonin molecule. Now serotonin is, in some ways, it's the major brain neurotransmitter. And the reason I say that is because during your embryological development, your brain grows out, you know, it sort of flowers forth. And it's guided in its development by the serotonin system, the system that uses serotonin as its primary neurochemical transmitter. So it's not only in our very archaic system, and it's so old that you share it, as I've mentioned before, with crustaceans, but it's also the system that sort of puts you together as you emerge out of nothing. And so you see its peculiar chemical structure there, and then you see these are all different hallucinogenic substances. This one is psilocybin, for example, and they're all, and DMT is a very weird chemical. It's very illegal, DMT. It produces, it's part of ayahuasca, although ayahuasca is made with a plant that contains DMT, and then something called an MAO inhibitor, which decreases the rate at which your body breaks it down. But pure DMT produces an instantaneous 10-minute hallucinogenic high that where people constantly report contact with aliens. And there's a psychiatrist who spent years documenting DMT experiences, and every single person he walked through the experience with reported the same thing. They're shot out of their body, they're immediately in an alien landscape. So, well, you know, what that seems to indicate is that, you know, from a more purely rational perspective, is that these chemicals produce characteristic experiences that are associated with visionary experience. They put you in something that's like a dream state. Now, oddly, the dream state seems to be somewhat similar from person to person, but there are ways that, in some sense, that the contents of the unconscious mind can be made manifest to the conscious mind, at least for brief periods of time. Sometimes that can be clearly horrifying, because sometimes people take these chemicals and have like the worst experience of their life. And part of that seems to be associated with the sort of thing that might happen to you in psychotherapy. So, for example, if you were convinced that your psyche wasn't very well ordered and you were harboring sort of dark secrets and lies and all the sorts of things that might complicate your life, and all sorts of familial pathology and, you know, cultural baggage and like the horrors that sort of live inside your brain, you know, in psychotherapy you would sort of confront those one by one. In a hallucinogenic experience you might confront all of those at the same time. You know, and for many people, that's exactly equivalent to a quick trip to hell, and it's not something they'd rather repeat. So, now why things are set up that way? Well, who knows? You know, I mean, we don't really understand these things. We don't understand the relationship between the parts of the brain that are articulated and conscious, and then the lower parts that are sort of the repositories of traumatic information. And there's deeper mysteries that we don't understand too. So it turns out, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term epigenesis, but there are studies of epigenetics now that show that there are certain experiences that alter your genetic structure. And well, we know that partly because if you put yourself in a new situation, a radically new situation, new genes will turn on inside of you, and they'll code for new proteins, and they'll build new structures for you. So new neurological structures sometimes, and that's part of how you can adapt. And it's also part of the reason why banging yourself against various obstacles, you know, in a kind of systematic way, is a good way of expanding your range of capabilities. So we know that experience can turn new genetic processes on that are sort of latent prior to that. But what we didn't know was that some of those experiences transform your genetic structures in a way that you can transmit to your children. So, and that, you know, that's Lamarckian evolution. No one ever hypothesized that was possible. But you can look it up. It's mainstream science now, although, you know, people are still not really sure what to do about it, how to think about it from a conceptual perspective, because that sort of thing wasn't supposed to be possible. So, you know, so we have no idea to what level of being your experiences can be encoded. And we really don't know how you encode experience anyways. We don't know what the fundamental structures of your memory are, how that's associated with your conceptions of time and space, and how that's related to your ongoing experience. Those things are deeply mysterious to us. And what happens, at least in part with the hallucinogens, is that they seem to take all the horrors and terrors that you haven't dealt with and just put them in your face now. And that's part of the shamanic experience. And so it's not something for people to take lightly, and you know, and generally people don't. So, but I've often found that it was very strange that these chemicals produce experiences that are so strange that our culture instantly deemed them illegal. You know, for me, it's like looking at what happened back in the Middle Ages when the Catholic Church went after Galileo because he had something, you know, strange to say about the moon. It's like these experiences have tapped into something that's a very, very primordial element of human existence and associated, say, with these shamanic rituals that have been going on for tens of thousands of years, and that human cultures have always used to orient themselves. And they're so there's so much anathema to our current culture that, you know, we punish people severely for experimenting with them. It's very, very peculiar behavior. So, although there's no doubt that this sort of thing is dangerous and very peculiar, but, you know,